Hello and welcome to The Focus, Finding Outstanding Classrooms Using Social Media. Today I'm honored to be interviewing author Daniel Pink. Mr. Pink has served as chief speechwriter for former Vice President Al Gore, written some best-selling books, and gave a TED Talk that should be viewed by anyone interested in productivity. While not technically in education, his TED presentation and his book Drive started a lot of dialogue about freedom and autonomy in the classroom. In his latest book, To Sell as Human, Daniel looks into how people are motivated and how great salesmanship is not just for traditional salesmen. So without further ado, please let's join Daniel Pink via Google Hangout.
What I look at my role as kind of an amplifier. Try to go out and find these cool things coming in and then amplify it using Twitter or whatever other kinds of mechanisms. So that's on that. As for why things have resonated, I think that teachers, in some ways, it's because I'm an outsider, it's because I'm not an educator, I'm someone who writes about business. And I think that that confers some credibility within education, rightly or wrongly. I can argue that wrongly would be the answer to that question, but we'll leave that aside for now. The other thing is that it offers, I think, teachers have so many difficult challenges. They recognize that so much of the system goes against the way that they know kids learn. And they have so many pressures, and I think that these kinds of mechanisms offer them one small thing that they can do to make things a little bit better. And over the years in writing about business and organizations, I've become a much fiercer proponent of small wins. We tend to go crazy over big, hairy, audacious goals. Let's go widespread transformation. And that's really hard and rarely happens. But if you can look for ways where people can get small wins, to do something specific, concrete, and actionable in their own realm that makes a difference, I think that can have a very positive cascading effect.
Okay. Well, there also seems to be kind of this very entrepreneurial feel going on right now. We're lucky enough to have worked with you earlier in the year where some of our students were trying to dip their foot into some businesses by trying to either be a business or connect with a lot of CEOs and things like that. Is this a trend, do you think, that has some legs to it, this entrepreneurial feel, or do you think this will be a trend that comes and goes?
I actually think it has some legs. I really do think that teachers, many teachers are very willing to take an entrepreneurial approach to teaching, to helping kids learn smarter and better. Again, they're so hemmed in by rules and regulations, standardized testing, other kinds of restrictions, that instead of trying to blow up the whole thing, they're looking for ways around it. And so I think that these kinds of things will continue to spread. And I think your earlier point, Don, about Twitter is really important too, because there's now a very simple mechanism for getting these ideas out. If this were 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, pre-Twitter, I think it'd be more difficult. They would go out via email and so forth. But now that you have so many people talking and listening via Twitter, that I think it's easier for these ideas to get out, for the good ones to rise to the top, and for the really, really, really good ones, and I think these fall into that category, for the really, really good ones to cascade.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've called it kind of like the ultimate teacher's lounge. I found this kinship where there are so many like-minded people, and I've got to admit, a lot of educators, and I'm trying to spread the gospel as a lot of us are, that we thought of the Kardashians for years. We thought of fluff. And now we're starting to see that there's this great movement where teachers can kind of share these ideas. And speaking of which, so I listened to your New Year's Day webinar, loved it. Mm-hmm. You talked a little bit, though, about in education, maybe there's going to be a possible shift to maybe the days of apprenticeships. Could you weigh in on that, please?
Sure. That's an idea that I flicked at. It's not that new of an idea. Other folks have talked about it. I think that one of the things that we're reckoning with right now are some pretty important questions about what's the purpose of higher education. And I think that we haven't really resolved that issue. At one point, at some level, we think it's entirely about sort of liberal arts and thinking skills and so forth, and that's a big part of it. But some of it, I think, inevitably is about workforce preparation. And there are plenty of people for whom a 4-year college degree is not the right for their goals, for their aspirations. And I think this country leaves those folks behind. And we need a better mechanism for getting those folks into building their skills, getting them into productive, work that's valuable to the community, that's valuable to them. Now, you see a lot of experimentation going on, say, at the community college level, where 2-year associate degrees are doing partnerships with local businesses that end up having a very clear pathway from education to the workplace. But I think that there are all kinds of experiments that need to be going on here. And this idea that you either go to college or you don't, it's very binary. You go get a 4-year degree or you do something else. You go out and try to find a job or join the military. I just think that's not the way the world works today. And we're doing a very, very inadequate job of providing a whole range of alternatives for people, of which apprenticeships are one really valuable one with a lengthy history. There's a long practice of it, and there was a long practice of it in this country, and there are very well-developed systems in countries like Germany that show us how to do it pretty well.
Now, do you think that that's going to have some sort of effect on some of the traditional four-year colleges? Are they going to hear the footsteps coming? I know that lately there's been kind of this, I wouldn't say anti-college movement, but like a hack your education movement, getting your own law degree without having to go to law school. There's a friend of mine named Ryan Porter who's, really big into some of the traditional trades that have been almost forgotten because they don't have 4-year. But do you think that the colleges might see this and say, hey, we may need to offer our internships earlier in the year, or do you think that they'll adjust at all?
I think that some will put their heads in the sand, and others will adjust. Yeah. And it really depends on what kind of college it is. I think that the elite colleges and universities in this country are going to be very, very slow to change. But I think the other ones are actually going to change, and they're going to look for different kinds of models of how you educate people and how you prepare people for the 21st century. And this idea that the only way to do that, the only way to prepare someone to be a citizen or to be a functioning member of the economy is a 4-year college degree from a certain kind of institution. It doesn't make any sense. Right. I mean, it's just not logical. And the other thing about it is that it also is it's so wrong on so many different levels. First of all, there are many other kinds of options that people should have, whether it's a 2-year associate's degree, whether it's some kind of non-degree program, whether it is some people, dropping out of college and hacking their education. I think there's a small number of people who that's appropriate for, very small. But there are a number of options that should be available to people rather than just basically this one-size-fits-all approach of a 4-year college degree. Now, the other thing is that if you look at the numbers of who's in college now, the ages are going up and up and up and up and up. And that's a huge issue. So someone might go to an apprenticeship, might go to a 2-year associate degree at a community college that leads directly to a job, do some work there in, say, the skilled trades or in some kind of technician role, and then basically maybe come into their own academically a little slower than other people. But then at that point, at age 28, be ready to do a 4-year college degree. And they should have that kind of option now. Now, there's huge barriers to adult learners getting 4-year college degrees. There are an enormous number of people in this country who have some college. And one of the big barriers, the big programmatic barriers, is that if they have any unpaid loans, or if they're in arrears at any of their loans, they have any unpaid fees, they can't move on.
Yeah.
And so there's something to be said for a kind of loan mitigation or fresh start proposal to sort of remove. There are a lot of people right now who are shackled. They can't pursue their education only because they have these they have some amount of debt, and they don't have the job to pay it off now, but they can't upskill in order to get a better job, so they're basically stuck. And this country has done a lot of loan forgiveness and a lot of loan mitigation for other kinds of entities. And I think that maybe it's time to do that for adult learners.
That'd be awesome. Thinking way, 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 way outside the box, do you think that there is a couple of companies that would step forward and almost entice kids right out of high school to not go to 4-year education? Because I envision it like this. Let's just make up somebody like a Google. Entice some really great students that were going to go to college, entice them to stay for 2 years, get some really great, unique insights from them. They might not even have to pay them, okay? So, or maybe really, really minimal pay, but they have the advantage of getting those 2 years of great, solid education and with no college debt. I know when I talk to my students that have graduated from college, I'm like, hey, what did you take out of college? A little bit of theory, but my internship was awesome. And so what if a company would offer a internship for 2 years, basically pay them nothing, and then have that Google 20% time model of extrapolating all these great young ideas, and then after the end of the 2 years, they can either A, go to college now, or B, go into the workforce with a ton of experience. Do you think that there's a company out there would be so bold to actually encourage kids to work for them instead of going to college? Kind of like an NBA. Oh my gosh, this is a really great.
No, it's like it's LeBron and Kobe and Kevin Durant.
Absolutely.
And going directly to the pros.
Yes,
I think that maybe the question is let's take basketball example. There are very, very well developed ways that professional basketball teams can identify basketball talent. There are high school leagues. Mm-hmm. There are AAU programs and so forth. And so it's actually very systematic, very easy to measure, very easy to detect. We don't have quite the same thing for, say, technical skills or technological skills. And if there was some kind of mechanism for doing that, then I think that you probably would see that.
That would be, yes.
And if you look at a place, there's some very, very interesting ventures that are kind of sort of doing this. There's a place called Guild, that is essentially a place where programmers and other kinds of software developers can hang out, put up their code, get reputation points from their colleagues and so forth. And hiring firms are going to that to say, basically going to the best schoolyard basketball court in the world and saying, who can play. Mm-hmm. And so I think you'll see some of that. The interesting thing, though, Don, it's a really, really interesting question. If you look at economists talk about a college degree as having what they call a signaling function. Mm-hmm. Right? The idea is that it signals to the world, hey, I can do work. Yeah. Right? I'm reasonably conscientious. I can mostly show up on time, and I'm trainable. Right. And I'm wondering whether the signaling function of a college degree is less robust today, and there are other kinds of things that can offer another kind of signaling function, whether it's a certification program, whether it's the kind of thing that you're envisioning, whether it's somebody's reputation on a place like Guild. And I think we'll start seeing some more of that sort of, whether it's a portfolio of work that they can present, I think we're going to start seeing more of that. Okay, very good. Moving forward, I know your time's limited, so I want to talk a little bit about your latest book, To Sell is Human. You're obviously, it's been said you're not an educator, but I was really, really, really happy to see your ed med section, a part of the book, because I've always felt like I'm selling a lot, and so you and I are selling right now.
Yeah. So, what made you think that there is a shift in sale paradigms, even for education?
Well, one of the things there are a number of things that got me into it. This previous book, again, as you know, I write mostly about business, and this previous book, Drive, talked about the inadequacies of certain kinds of motivators. And, a classic kind of motivator, old school motivator, is a sales commission. Mm-hmm. And I didn't write much about that initially, and I started writing about it some more because I started hearing from companies that had eliminated commissions for salespeople and seen sales go up. Really kind of interesting. And that got me interested in this. The other thing is that I don't think we have a really good handle on what people actually do at work. And so I did some survey research to try to get at that question. And what we found is that people are spending an enormous amount of their time on the job persuading, influencing, convincing, cajoling, selling. And when I was surprised by how much time people were spending doing that. And when I looked for explanations, I started going to the data, and I realized that all the job growth in the last 10 years, last 15 years almost, has been in education and healthcare services in the country. And those professions are all about trying to move other people, trying to persuade other people, trying to get other people to do things a little bit differently.
Mm. Well, I think that that's a really important part, because I know as we're trying to provide incentives for people to be healthier, for preventative care, you're right. My wife's a nurse practitioner, and she and I both read the book, and we were astounded on how...
Yeah, you're an ed med couple.
Yes. And we were both impressed by, we need to step up our sales game. One, because I'm trying to convey ideas and concepts to students, but she's really into trying to get people healthier, and that's a heck of a thing to ask for people.
It's in some ways much harder than even education, which is extremely hard. It's even harder than education because in healthcare and wellness, you're dealing with certain kinds of biological diseases.
Okay.
You're trying to get people to lose weight and eat less.
Yeah.
When their bodies and brains have evolved for a world of scarce calories, where the whole point of the way to survive is to get as many calories as you can, and to house them for the inevitable lean times. So, our brains and bodies are from the time when we were on the savannah, and now we're here in fat and happy America, where there's food on every corner and calories are abundant, not scarce. And that's a very hard problem to solve.
Two last things. Number one, have you gotten much feedback from teachers also from probably, and I hate to say this because you've written some wonderful books, but I love Johnny Bunco. That should be on every guidance counselor's shelf. Have you gotten as much feedback from Johnny Bunco as you have from Drive?
No, and we have not, Don, and thank you for those kind words. I love that Johnny Bunco book.
It's awesome.
I love all my children, but it's a great book. And one of the things that's interesting about that is that I actually wrote it initially for basically college graduates and so forth, but we ended up getting our audience really in high schools. And so some of the more enlightened guidance counselors have brought it in. And a lot of parents are giving it to their kids as gifts. And we haven't gotten the response on that one that we got on Drive.
Well, if I may make my pitch, my 12-year-old read it, and it was one of those things that, you use the term can't put it down. First of all, she flies through things. One, very zen, and two, she had it done in about 45 minutes, and she was quoting it. For those of you that don't know, it's a graphic novel. It's a quick read, but it's an incredibly deep read. I loved it. I can't say enough. If you're watching this and you're an educator, you really, really need to. If you like to drive and if you like to sell as human, those are great. Johnny Bunco is something that everybody. My 9-year-old also read it. Hope that doesn't sound demeaning. My 9-year-old read it and loved it.
Hey, I love that 9-year-olds read it. That's
oh my gosh! Well, we're kind of our family. My wife has a thing called Self-Actualizing Sunday every Sunday. So.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
that sounds rough.
She's a better person than I am. She's deep. One last thing, totally off the subject. I know you're a baseball fan, and actually an Indianapolis native, unfortunately, through the last game of the playoffs, Drew Storen. What do you think of your Nationals? Are they going to the playoffs this year?
You know what? I'm a little concerned about how the season has begun.
Yeah.
We're only, as we talk today, we're only a half game out of first place. But there are a lot of things about the team this year that are worrying me. They really are. And I'm just hoping that it's a long season and that this great team will come together and eventually start playing up to its capacity. Right now, they're not quite playing up to their capacity.
All right. Well, fair enough. Well, Mr. Dan Pink, everybody, I would really encourage you to, if you are an educator and by this chance you're one of the few people that have been under a rock and haven't discovered either Drive or the TED Talk, I suggest that you take a look at it. To sell as human, I think, is just as important as we've discussed that sales-based teaching now is really a part of the reality of what we live in. And again, if you have kids or you just want a nice piece of reflective reading, get Johnny Bunco graphic novel. You'll thank me later. Mr. Dan Pink, thank you so much.
Mr. John Wettrick, thank you. It's great talking to you. Keep up the good work. You rock.
Thank you, sir.
All right, see ya.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you want to make a recommendation on other educators that should be on the show, please find me on Twitter at Don Wettrick or email me at dwettrick@gmail.com. Should be below here. If you're interested more on innovation in education, I would recommend that you follow the Twitter hashtags Genius Hour or 20% Time. I would love for the discussion to continue on why we need this type of movement in our schools. I would also like to recommend taking a look at Dan Pink's TED Talk on the surprising truth on what motivates us on either TED.com or YouTube.com. Well worth your time. Well, we're about to go on summer break here at our school, but I'll be recording some focus show episodes this summer, so please keep your recommendations coming. Remember, the purpose of this show is to find great educators and give them the spotlight they deserve. I want to combat some of the negative coverage that teachers receive from the media, so it is our duty to inform people on what's going right in education as well. Thanks again, everybody, for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and have a great summer.